Hey everybody, welcome back. So any of you guys that have been keeping up with me for any amount of time know that I'm pretty direct, pretty straightforward, pretty much say what needs to be said when it needs to be said. And I'm the type of person that when there's an elephant in the room, I'm probably going to be the first one to talk about it. So don't go anywhere. We're going to talk about it today on Intrepid Exotics. So before we go into the video, just know that nothing I say is meant to be intentionally provocative. It's not intended to make anybody angry. It's intended to address some things and put some things into perspective that, when applied, my belief is it helps not just the reptile community, but any community that you can think of. It has a lot to do with building that relationship with reality and helping us to treat everybody just a little bit better. So without any further ado, let's get into it. I had a couple things I wanted to put out today. I'm going to tell a couple stories, and all of this stuff is going to tie in at the end. So just kind of bear with me for a second. And I'm not going to go into everything that this relates to. I'm hoping, folks can kind of draw their own inferences. And I don't want it to be an hour-long video, but like I said, just bear with me. There's a couple stories here that I think all tie in to a really good point. We're going to go back to 1998 in Bosnia. NATO operations over there. The war had officially stopped. There wasn't a whole lot of skirmishes and things like that. We still had some issues, still had some bombing, stuff like that. Still had a lot of UXOs to clean up over there. And there was even one time when we was coming back in one night from a mission, and we're pulling in, putting the Humvee back online. All the lights are out on camp. Everybody's scattering, running for the bunkers. And I just happened to, since we was putting our vehicle in, end up in the bunkers with the headquarters team, camp commander and whatnot. And, so we're sitting there listening to the radio traffic as our Air Force is preparing to intercept 2 attack aircraft that were heading to our camp. And they managed to turn them back when they were about 2 minutes out from our location. One thing that didn't hit the news. Another thing that didn't hit the news was when our intelligence officer came up and says, "Okay, guys, grab 3 days worth of shit, get in the trucks, stand by. We've got a possible dispute with the Russians over this bridge over here that we may have to go deal with." So, interestingly enough, sitting there in a motor pool with 3 days worth of stuff, getting ready to go tangle with the Russians, something else that didn't make the news. Which was interesting too, because I'd been to Russian military camps over there and sat down and listened to how kerosene is a cure for everything over some vodka. Some stereotypes are true. But again, that kind of stuff didn't hit the news. Another interesting dynamic when we was over there is you had the Muslims, the Croats, and the Serbs, 3 different entities that were at odds with each other. This region is kind of a melting pot of religions. Muslims, Christians, Catholics. None of these people really see eye to eye, and sometimes they kill each other over it. En masse in the Balkans. But we would sit in our hooches at night, and we'd have a couple different TVs on, and we would watch the local news channels. Bear in mind, this is 98. This is pre-YouTube and all that stuff. This is where you actually had to turn on the TV and watch something there that was scheduled. But we'd sit down there, there'd be an event happen. Some of them we were involved in, and we knew exactly what happened. Some of them we weren't. But whatever it was, we'd sit there with the translators, and they'd roll us through what they were saying on each one of them. And each one of those news channels portrayed it as an entirely different story. None of them ever took responsibility for it, of course. It was always the other guy's fault. And they always tried to inflame their people against somebody else. Whether they were right or wrong, it didn't matter. Media is huge. Media is such a huge deal. Back in the days when Hitler was moving up in power, one of the first things he did was commandeered communications, commandeered the newspapers, stuff like that. His mass media messages it wasn't just riling up certain people on his positions. It was putting out misinformation, propaganda, hiding what he was doing, because that was a big part of it. The whole thing wasn't, he knew that if the rest of the world found out about it, there was going to be a problem. So media, as important as it is to help keep people informed, it's also a very deceptive tool that dictators throughout history have used in order to shape the way people think and gain support. So you'll see a lot of times, especially here currently in the US, there's so many different places where we get our information from. You'll see these things where, you ask some people where they get their information from, and they're like, well, I don't trust any of the mainstream media, so I get all my information off Facebook. Really? As ridiculous as that sounds, that shit's true. The same dynamic happens here as we watched happen back in '98 in Bosnia. Media organizations are going to put out information that best suits their purposes. And there's always things going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of. Anybody that watches Fox News right now is going to say, man, screw Biden, he's not doing anything about Israel, because they've got an angle that they can hit him with that. And if that's the only source where you get your information from, you're not aware at all of the fact that he has been actively trying to get Israel to chill the hell out since this thing started. Israel has a long history, ever since the Holocaust, of the nation coming to their aid. And a history like that doesn't turn around on a dime. But that's just one example. It's one popular example that a lot of people may be familiar with. That, one, you're not going to get the whole story. Two, you're not going to know everything that's going on behind the scenes. Anybody watching this that can tell me that they're a national security expert and it sits in the White House and understands what's going on around this thing, please feel free to speak up and correct me if I'm speaking out of line. Okay? But the thing is that it's not even that issue that I'm talking about. It's everything that comes out. People will build their worldviews around what they're exposed to. And people running the media organizations intentionally expose you to things that are meant to mold the way you think. It's something that you hear so frequently, especially from the far right, talking about how everybody else is sheep. Guys, I have this discussion with people repeatedly that, the groupthink, especially on the extremes, you guys get buried in information silos. You only hear half the story. You don't know what you're talking about on the other stuff, because a lot of the stuff's not even public information. So, the reason why this kind of came up is because, there's been a couple times here recently in the reptile community, people getting completely scorched because they may have misspoke. They may have done something that's a little bit different that some people don't agree with. So it's like, okay, let's go ahead and crucify this dude right now for this. And I know anybody here watching this, if that was you, and you either made an honest mistake or you were doing something that was a little bit different that people weren't really aware of, you wouldn't want people to come and crucify you and automatically assume worst intentions. Yet so many people do that to others, which is really harmful. I don't make any bones about the fact that I thoroughly despise a thief, thoroughly despise a liar, a fraud, And I think most of us can agree with those things. You see it on, like I made a remark the other day about Morph Market. They're kicking out the sex offenders. They're kicking out the people that cheat people. Awesome. Keep the community clean. Why we can't have the intellectual consistency to apply that across the board and not let our morals and our integrity just fly out the window based on how much we like somebody or don't like somebody else is beyond me. I had somebody the other day accuse me of virtue signaling. And, these concepts, the values that I have, about being honest, about being fair, about being respectful and treating people right and things like that, and trying to help, trying to do the right thing. These are all values that were etched into my psyche years before Facebook and YouTube ever existed. And I've carried those values into battle with me on more than one occasion, more than one situation, for more than one entity, and sometimes just for myself in the middle of the night in a dark alley. This is all stuff that I've had ingrained in me through years of being a martial artist and a soldier, and other things that I've done. So this is just, to me, it's just a concept of basic right and wrong on so many levels. And I don't care who you like or dislike, it shouldn't change your basic values. You shouldn't go after one person for lying and being a crook and be completely okay with somebody else lying and being a crook. That's worse than being a liar yourself. If your morals are so pliable and so flexible that you don't even care about right and wrong as long as you like or dislike somebody. In what world is that right? People talk about the good old days. Well, we've never really had a good old days. All the way from the beginning, people like to, chant about the Constitution and our freedoms and all that other stuff. What year was the Constitution written and, accepted? Okay. 17 something? What year was slavery abolished? How empty are some of those words, ensure the blessings of liberty, written by people that kept slaves. Is there a little bit of hypocrisy there? I think so. And we are still working our way forward in an attempt to get equal rights for everybody. We still haven't happened yet. We've been consistently growing. There's no time in our past where we've been better than we are today. So there's, I wish for the good old days crap, especially make America great again. There is no point in our history where we have been more great than we are today if we base it on the values stated in the Constitution. Because there is no point in our history where more people have had liberty. Granted, some of those liberties are under fire again because of some backwards thinking. But I want to point something out to you guys about the Make America Great Again thing. You'll hear me say sometimes that that's plagiarized from 1930s Germany. Because it is. I've got a recording here somewhere that I'll get at some point. The final words of one of the SS officers on a gallows, talking about we're innocent of all these accusations, God bless Germany and make Germany great again. Because everything that happened in World War II with Germany began with World War I after Germany was defeated there and they fell under the Treaty of Versailles. It took a ton of money from them in reparations. There were this big, great power that was going to go to war and they were going to conquer everything. And they lost. And they declined. and they had all these reparations to pay, and people were starving. And then Hitler comes in and says, we're going to make Germany great again. And he lied his ass off. He manipulated the media. He threw propaganda out left, right, and center, got enough people to, if not agree with him, to turn the other cheek and not pay attention to him. And we all know how that turned out. So, that's one of the things that kind of makes the hair on the back of my neck stand up every time I hear somebody say, make America great again. Because that doesn't apply to us. It did, however, apply to a different place and a different time that taught us lessons that we should not forget anytime soon. And the way they were able to pull that off was with one huge information silo. So much easier today for people to get trapped in different ones. If you live in Germany and the only thing you've got is a radio and a TV and it's all state-sponsored media, then all you're going to get is the message that they give you. You're not going to know anything else. Much the same way Russia is doing right now. Putin has a grip on the media over there. They put out what he tells them to put out. And if they don't, an accident happens to somebody. But neither here nor there. I actually made a joke the other day. What do you get when you take a barely evolved primate, one chromosome away from a chimpanzee, and expose them to more information than they're capable of processing? You get tribalism. And so many expansive forms of it, because there's so much information out there and so many places where somebody can get buried, hear something they like, only expose themselves to things that they like, build a whole world view on 10% of the information out there, and completely ignore the rest of reality. It happens all the time. You hear people when they're talking about January 6th, you'll say, hey, what is right about breaking the windows, busting through the windows of the Capitol building, going in there, beating up cops and smearing shit on the walls? How does going to jail for that make you a hostage? And there's actually people out there who say, I didn't see any of that. It was all over certain, branches of the media. That's all they showed for months was, this is insane. How can something like this happen here? But there's other media networks that have never shown that. So the people that only watch that only see, idiots like Marjorie Taylor Greene singing with them in prison, calling them hostages. And this is an example of issues of basic right and wrong that we teach our children from the time they can understand the words that are coming out of our mouths. And for some reason, people are just so easily manipulated into completely shit-canning their integrity and going with whatever feels right, And one of the first things when I see something and I call it out, if I've got evidence that something's false or a lie, I'm known to speak up sometimes, and you get people saying, I had a guy the other day say, oh, you must watch CNN. Of course I watch CNN. I watch CNN, I watch Fox, I watch Newsmax, I watch OAN, I watch AP, Al Jazeera. What else is there? God, anything that I can get my hands on, I watch. Because you can pick up on the headlines, You look at a headline, you listen to what they got to say about it. You go back and you look at the other side. Look at their headline on the same thing. See what they got to say about it. Typically, you get two opposing stories. Go to a more centrist form media. See what they've got to say about it. Do a little bit of research. If it's a labor statistic, go to the Bureau of Labor and Statistics and kind of look it up. Say, okay, well, are we actually XYZ? Okay, now you've just verified that piece of information. You've got the opinions of two different people coming from polar opposite ends of the spectrum, both telling you to think something different. And you find out that, well, It's a little bit of truth here, a little bit of truth here. This is the reality of the situation. And you gauge your sources. You figure out what's true. To hell with your feelings. I said that a million times, and I'll say it a million more. It doesn't matter how you feel about something. The facts are the facts. The evidence is the evidence. The truth is what the facts are. That to steal a line from Aaron Ra. But it's important. When you get to bring this all back to how it impacts the reptile community, there's still people that are staunch supporters of Samson Pruitt. It doesn't make any difference what you say, what you do. They're going to support him. They're going to back him. Everything else be damned. Do you think that person's off a little bit after everything that's come out? Samson Pruitt used to be in fairly good standing with a lot of people. All this stuff came out. People are like, oh, wait a second. Okay, this ain't cool. This goes against my basic values. We've got certain political figures right now looking at literally 91 felonies after a slew of guilty findings already. At what point does everybody just go, okay, you know what? This goes against my values. I can't stay behind this. That's why I say anybody that can support anything like that, I find their integrity questionable, because it is on a very objective level. It's not my opinion. Ain't got shit to do with politics. It's got to do with basic right and wrong and being a decent human being. And if somebody doesn't have a good understanding of basic right and wrong and doesn't have any desire to be a basic human being or to hold our standards to, or our leaders to the standards of being a decent human being, then I find that person untrustworthy and I don't care to associate with them. Just to kind of put a bow on all of this stuff real quick, the whole reason why I bring this up is, I see this stuff small scale. Recently Adam Wickens got lambasted because he'd been successful keeping several leopard geckos in one enclosure for years, and some people didn't agree with it, so they decided to roast him over that. There was another guy that tried selling a monitor lizard with kind of rare genetics on morph market. People didn't like the price that he put him out there for, so he got lambasted and roasted for that, calling him everything except what he was. Guy just decided to put it out there, buy it or don't buy it. One thing that I find is really funny about that too is everybody talks about how you don't want to price the reptiles so cheap that they're throwaway animals. If every reticulated python was $5,000, people would take it more seriously. Well, let's go back to some intellectual consistency here. We've got an animal, it's got kind of rare genetics, it's got cosmetic issues, otherwise has a good life, and he wanted to see it in a good home. He put a good price tag on it. Anybody that pays $4,000 for that animal is going to take care of it. You send it out there, you get rid of it for $100. Somebody's going to go, oh, cool, $100 monitor lizard. They're going to get it home. They're not going to like the fact that it's disfigured at some point, and it's going to get neglected and die. But in this particular case, selling them for a good price is, even if it's a bad price, he's selling it for a high price. He cared about the animal. He wanted to see, if somebody wanted to give it a good home. So he gets ripped apart for that. Even up to threats of violence and things like that. So, that's the culture that we live in today. Ever since 2016, and I'll say this flat out, because I saw it coming then, I've mentioned it, and it's just progressively gotten worse ever since then, is there was a time where it wasn't really socially acceptable to be a complete asshole to people. But then something happened in 2016. We got a person in the highest office in the world, practically, who gave everybody license to be as big of an asshole to people as they wanted to. It's really cool to make fun of handicapped people. It's really cool to come up with childish nicknames for people that you don't like. It's really cool to do something, immediately blame somebody else for it, and continue to publicly degrade them when they've done nothing wrong. It's perfectly cool to sexually assault somebody and then continue to demean them and not be able to stop after the first $5 million hits, and continue to demean them and not wanting to stop after the next $85 million hits. This is the kind of stuff that gives mean and violent and nasty and toxic people license to publicly be mean and nasty and toxic. You know? And nobody can deny that the rhetoric and that childish behavior has just gotten progressively worse since 2016. You got to notice, though, there was a little break in it right around 2020, right before all this election stuff started back up, right before somebody else announced. You know, we had a little break there where somebody wasn't really in the news as much, and things seemed a lot more peaceful. I don't think that's a coincidence. So, I know we're coming up on a half hour already. I guess to summarize the whole point on this thing is that we get a ton of information thrown at us. Rapid fire, as fast as we can absorb it, and then they just keep piling it on. A lot of people have positions just because they don't have the mental real estate available after they get done with spouse, kids, work, animals, taking care of them, their second job, whatever else it is, or, you know, just trying to take a break and maintain their sanity. You know, people don't have the mental real estate to absorb everything and always triage it, you know? But if you're going to state opinions on something, if you're going to state opinions about another person, if you're going to state opinions on care of an animal, any aspect of any of that stuff, you know, you've got to make sure that you're married to reality when you do it. You know, if you're going to speak on something, learn about it. Don't just learn about it from one source, because if you're learning about it from one source in the media, it's almost guaranteed you don't have all the facts, and somebody's going to jump up and say, dude, you know, the rest of the world understands, you know, the entire sphere of this problem to a degree. You're taking this one little corner right here and just trying to rile people up. You know, so I mean, it's really important to look outside of what makes you feel good. You know, if you find yourself completely hating another, you know, broadcaster or something like that, and I'm never going to listen to them because I hate them. Cool. Watch them. You know, there's one thing that every great general does is they go in and they read the writings of their opponents. You know, I guarantee you the generals that were fighting Hitler read Mein Kampf. Because if you actually think somebody is an enemy and you actually think that you need to win a fight against them, then it is really in your benefit to get in here, to learn as much about what they think as possible. You need to know that person better than they know themselves. So if you're one of those folks that you get buried in like Newsmax or something and that's all you watch, and they teach you to hate the libs and they teach you to hate everybody else, then it's in your best interest. If you want to have an impact, learn exactly how they all think. Look at what they've got to say. And do that enough, and then always compare that information back. You know, you're going to see two different sides of the story. Who's right? Well, look up what the most unbiased sources are and see what they've got to say about it. You know, And then when they start breaking things down and they start citing studies, go and read those studies. That's the path to finding the truth. And that should be important. Yeah. Anybody that says, I don't care if my beliefs are true, I just believe them, you get no respect from me. You know, I could believe that there's a diamond the size of a refrigerator in my backyard. Maybe it'll make me feel better. Maybe that's my retirement policy. But nobody is under any obligation to respect that. And I think too many people expect their opinions to be respected regardless of the evidence, regardless of the truth. And that's just not acceptable to me. If it is to you, maybe there's some deeper discussions to be had there. So, and I know there's probably going to be some people that may disagree with some points that I've made. You're welcome to come in and try and prove them wrong. You bring evidence. More than happy to discuss evidence. If you start trolling, start throwing up MAGA bullshit, I'm just going to block you. I got no desire to engage that level. You know, that's just the nature of the beast. So I'm not going to change my values as a human being based on the amount of followers or good intentions or good attention that I might get off the internet. I don't work like that. I've got values based in right and wrong. Like I said, they've been etched into my psyche. They're not going to change. They're fair. They work. They keep me in touch with reality. You can either like it or you can leave. Can't make everybody happy all of the time. But I'm going to be honest. So, you guys have an awesome day.